Thank you everybody for being here. We are starting at the moment our third Distinguished Innovators Lecture Seminar in our Master of Innovation at Stanford University. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Professor Joe Tranquillo. Joe is a professor in biomedical engineering at Bucknell University. And as you already know, he was awarded by the American Society of Engineering Education the award for biomedical engineering. So it's a great honor to have him here so he can share with us his vision in terms of education and doing interdisciplinary research. Joe was, as you know as well, he was a visiting professor during his sabbatical leave in Stanford University last year. That's where many faculties from our university were able to meet him as well. And since then he came back to university, and well, we have the great pleasure to have him here today. As you know, he also is a professional dancer, so he will probably make us move a little bit. So well, so let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you for coming.
I had made slides that I was going to post, but I don't think we need them. So no slides. And what that means is that I have some things that I want to say in the beginning, but then I think we can just let this go and be more dynamic. And that'll actually be one of the themes that I'm going to bring up in the beginning. But first, I need to make a little bit of a confession about all of this. I'm not an entrepreneur. I've never owned a business. I've never started a business. I've never worked out in industry. I've been an academic. I've been in schools all of my life. So the question is, what am I doing here, right? You're probably asking. Last year, I got to spend some time at Stanford. And one of the first weeks that I was there, we were sitting around a table, and you know, it's Stanford, we're at Silicon Valley, and a lot of the people there were from startup companies. And so we're going around the table. Oh, this, and it's, you know, a very young person, like looked like maybe one of my kids, right? Very young person. Oh, I did this and I did that, and I've already started up this company, and now I'm on to my second company, right? Wow. Right? And the next person, and they talk about their startups, and you know, oh, I've had 4 startups and one failed, but I sold one, and you know, I'm still involved in this other one, and now I have this great idea of this other one. I'm like, wow. And I'm thinking, what am I going to say? Right? So it goes around, it comes to me, and I said, I'm Joe, I'm on sabbatical here, and I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm just a professor. And Tom Byers, who's the co-director of the STVP, stopped me almost immediately, and he said, no, that's not true at all. You are an entrepreneur. I've read about some of the things that you've done. You are an entrepreneur. You're just not the kind that creates business value out in the economy. You're the kind who does it inside of universities, in education, and as well as outside of education, out in the community. So after that meeting, he pulled me aside and he said, I want to tell you something. You're going to spend a year here, and at the end of it, when you go in front of a group of people, I want you to be able to say, I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I'm in front of a group of people, I'm an entrepreneur, just not the normal kind. And I think that's actually a very important message for just almost anybody, no matter what your age, no matter what you do, is that anybody can be an entrepreneur, can have the mindset of the entrepreneur, and can create value. Now that could be, how many are parents? How many have kids, right? You're entrepreneurs, right? You're entrepreneurs. You have a startup, right? It's called a child, right? And it constantly changes, it constantly shifts. You constantly have to try things and shift tactics, and sometimes you fail, right? All of the things that we talk about in entrepreneurship, you do, and you create one of the most amazing values right? Which is a child. They can then go off and create their own value. Now, that's one of the things that I love about education, is that the value that I create is people that can then go off and create more value, right? So you hear teachers talk about this all the time, that why did you become a teacher? Well, it's so that the people I teach can go off and do great things. And some of them may become teachers, right? But some of them may also go off and create value in lots of other ways. And so I think Tom was right. I am an entrepreneur, and I think almost anybody can be an entrepreneur. So tonight, some of the things I want to share with you, and I want it to come out in stories, and I want it to come out more dynamically, are the ways that I've been an entrepreneur. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cough, unfortunately. So since we have some time, I want to hear from all of you. What do you think of that idea, that anybody can be an entrepreneur? Do you think that? And again, that's just an opinion. I could be wrong. So what do you all think about that? You think it's true, or do you think or part of what I'm asking is, are entrepreneurs made, or are they born that way?
That's both.
You think both? Okay. So maybe everyone has a little bit of entrepreneur, but you can make it better?
Well, I think there are some people, they're basically not made to be entrepreneurs at all. And others that probably do have, that little spark in them, mm-hmm. and they just need, a situation or someone to ignite it.
Right.
Mm. And it can be, the situation they live, like, I don't know, someone lost a job, they actually have a family to support, sure. And probably one of the best ways to get started with a new company, or with a startup. Or also, people that are very poor and constantly think about ways how to get out of poverty. Or just, you've been in a family of people like being entrepreneurs, and it comes to you very naturally. Mm-hmm. And those that don't have that, then they don't. They go on to be perfect employees all their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think they are made.
Okay.
But I have a very personal opinion maybe about this. It's that I think entrepreneurship has something to do with humbleness.
Uh-huh.
Being available to negotiate with reality, to be out there and see what are the conditions, what you can do, what you can sell, and then change again. People who are not entrepreneurs like to be protected inside a faculty or a job or stuff like that. But that obviously can change during life, and it's an internal and quite deep psychological process, I think.
Yeah.
I think, like Claudia, both. But all we are entrepreneurs, because all we can have children, but we have to make them.
So other reactions or responses to that?
Yeah, I don't like the entrepreneurship as a noun. I prefer as a verb.
Verb, yeah.
Because I don't like it as an adjective. It's the same as leader. Oh, this guy is a leader. I don't think that as a noun or adjective is like a little, I don't know. I don't like it. But as an adjective, as a verb, I would like, or I leader this kind of,
yes.
Or the same as entrepreneurship.
So there are a number of people at the STVP who the phrase they use to say that is entrepreneurship is a contact sport, right? It's not theory, right? You have to do it. Now, again, there are lots of people who come up with a theory of entrepreneurship, but to be an entrepreneur is to do, right? And it's not just to do in a small way, right? And that's why they say it's a contact sport, right? You have to get a little bit dirty and be willing to get beat up a little bit right, to be an entrepreneur.
I guess we all have challenges that sometimes prove us if we are able or we are not, and maybe that's a challenge in a way to see if of what we are made, maybe, and if we can cross the chance or not.
So I think this is an important point, which is some of it is part of, and I think we heard it in a couple of the responses, is part of being an entrepreneur is actually a mechanism for understanding something about yourself, right? What you're made of, right? What makes you tick? And I think that I had a very good friend who, we were in school together, and I went to academia, right? He became an entrepreneur, and the reason he became an entrepreneur was someone said to him, it was actually a relative, it was an uncle, who said, if you want to really understand who you are, go start a business. You will find out who you are by starting a business. Now, I think there are lots of ways of finding out who you are. And what I would share is that I found out a lot about who I was by teaching. But I also think it's not a mistake that I've been a very entrepreneurial teacher. If I just went through the motions all the time, I don't think I would have learned anything about myself, right? So I absolutely agree with that you learn it. The term that people use is self-efficacy. I don't know if you've all heard that, but it's the internal confidence and drive and motivation to do really great things, to go out and add value. And I think that the only way you can gain that is by trying things, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding. Right? You gain confidence in what your abilities are. You understand them better. Okay. I want to share with you something that has become my version, my own personal version of entrepreneurship. And again, this is not written in stone, it's an idea, and so I'll just share it with you. Okay. Before I talk about that, a little bit of history about me. I was trained as a physicist and then an engineer. So not as an educator. That came later. But there was a part of me that is still very much a physicist. And actually the meeting that I had right before this was talking with someone, and we were talking about n-dimensional space. And we were talking about if we took projections through something and looked at the mathematical shadows that were created by complex cardiac rhythms, right? So we were talking about physics and biology, the combination of those two things. And I can still get excited about those things. And that's my history and my training. I'm going to talk a little bit about physics. But don't worry, there's not going to be any math. So in physics, there's a whole field called thermodynamics, which part of it is about heat, but it's really about how ordered and disordered are things. And there's a theory, the second law. In closed systems, the system will either become ordered or disordered. Now, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. To reach minimum energy. So the basic idea of the law is systems, if left on their own, will always tend towards the minimum energy, right? And it predicts two possibilities. So you can think of this as a hill, right? If you put a ball here, it rolls down. This is a minimum. If you put it here, it rolls down to a minimum. Now the two states are a crystal. This is the physical version. A crystal or a gas. Order or disorder. And so according to the theory, however you start the system, it's going to go towards one of those. And there are lots of applications of this. In economics, there are people who talk about things reach stable points, right? They're either going to be ordered or disordered. In the universe, people talk about things becoming more disorderly. Usually you hear the disorder part, not the order part, right? But a crystal is ordered and it's very stable. So you can either be ordered or disordered. Now here's the problem. Here's the connection to entrepreneurship. This is efficiency. And there are lots of businesses that get trapped and obsessed with becoming like a crystal. They do something, they have processes and people and products that work, and people buy them, and so they optimize and optimize and optimize. Well, what are they doing? They're becoming like a crystal, right? They're becoming very stable. They continue making that product, and as long as people buy that product, they're going to be okay, right? We know that doesn't always work, right? Because things are changing out there. Now, there's another way, and again, there's no real good word out here, but on the extreme over here, you could also say, what if we just tried everything? Everything we saw, everything we tried, we're constantly just making connections, we're constantly trying new things. All we do all day long is try to come up with new things, right? That's also, according to physics, a stable thing to do, right? But we know that that system's not going to last very long if it does that. It's because it's terribly inefficient, right? But it generates new things. So in reality, what we want is we want to be somewhere in between, right? So maybe not right at the top, right? But we want to be able to stay somewhere in here. Again, some companies maybe move a little more this way. Some companies maybe move a little bit more that way. But if you stay only like a crystal, you do nothing new. If you're over here, you never do anything repeatably. Right? You can't repeat anything. So the question is, how do you get in here? Now, there are lots of people who talk about, there are books out there that talk about things, right? So you'll read some books and they say, be creative. Here's all these great ways of doing this, right? Well, they're talking about techniques and tools so that if you're too far here, you can move this way. Right? Then there are also strategy books that say, if you're too disordered, here's how to order yourself. So again, when you read business books, when you read innovation books, when you read lots of these books, a lot of times they're giving you tools, they're giving you ideas that are helping you go this way or go that way and find a good medium between the two. Now, as I said, some companies have products where they can afford to do this, but they can't forget to be creative. Other companies we think of as being very creative, but if you look at them carefully, Google has a lot of processes and a lot of things that are efficient within it. It's just that they're able to go back and forth. And that's going to be a big message here. Is you need both. Right? Okay. So I'm going to eventually talk a little bit more about this, but I want to hear from all of you. What do you think? Again, this is not groundbreaking, right? It's not earth-shattering. This sounds like common sense, right?
Yeah. It's. Can I talk even though I'm asking?
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear this because of two things. One is to suggest a word for creative. I would say chaos.
Chaos, yes.
Or creative chaos.
Yep.
And the second thing is interesting to hear this and think about one as a person, because as either an entrepreneur or as a person, I find myself identifying with comfort level on the efficiency side, but being able to handle an amazing amount of chaos.
Yes.
And so it's interesting to think about this, not applied only to a company, but as an individual, as yourself.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's actually a book out there called Adapter Innovator. So I frame this in terms of companies, in terms of groups of people, but you could also frame this in terms of societies or cities, or right? So we could start the company, we could actually get bigger. But the other way you can go, and things like the innovator's dilemma and things like that are talking more at the company's level. You can also talk about it at the personal level. And there's actually a test I could probably share with all of you. You can go out, and they use words that I actually don't like. They talk about people being either adapters or innovators. And I'll tell you later a little bit about why I don't like that term. But they basically say no one is purely an adapter, no one is purely an innovator. But here's the difference between the two, psychologically the difference. An adapter is somebody who naturally likes order and structure and regularity in their life. They want to be like the crystal. And they structure their life in such a way that most of their life is like a crystal, but if something comes along from the outside that's not like a crystal, that forces them away from that a little bit, they adapt to it. Right? They tolerate it. Right? But their natural state is to be here. And so these people work more incrementally. Right? So if they're pushed away, they become incremental. The people over here are constantly asking, why do we do it the way we do it? There must be a better way. We have to keep trying things. We haven't found the best way to do it yet. Let's keep messing around with it and tinkering, right? These are the tinkerers. And so they're a little bit more radical, right? Now, there's a test that you can go and you can take, and it'll supposedly tell you which one you are. Again, I don't know if I necessarily believe this or buy into all of this, but they do make a very good qualification. They say very few people are way over to this side. Very few people are way over to that side. Most people are somewhere in the middle. It actually is kind of bell-shaped, right? Most people have a little bit of both. But you lean one way or the other. Now here's the question. Who do you want in your company? Right. Who do you want to hire in your company? So, just curious.
Maximum energy.
Right. You want some combination of both. But what I would say is it's going to depend a little bit, right? It's going to depend a little bit. And the hypothesis I would have, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, is if your business is constantly being perturbed from the outside, you're constantly needing to adjust and come up with new ideas and being on the cutting edge, and it's fast paced and innovations are coming quickly, who do you want to hire more of? Yeah, you want to hire more on this side, right? What if your business is not changing that quickly? Well, maybe a little more that way. So it gives a little bit of a framework of thinking about what's the right mix. Now, what I've done there is I've compartmentalized it in terms of people, right? So you hire more of these kinds of people than those kinds of people.
But
Yeah.
what about people that can actually do both?
Right. So there are people who can do both. And in reality, everybody can do both, right? Everybody can do some of one versus another. There is theory that some of this is innate, right? So you're more innately one way or the other. This goes back to our earlier argument of if you start off there, is it possible to end up there? And again, I don't know, right? Over your
time are changing of the position and we need to spend energy.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So what this theory says is that innately maybe you're here, right? And there are some people that would say that's in your DNA. There's nothing you can do about it, right? You're stuck there. The other way to look at this is maybe you are innately there, but with enough energy, you can get over to here. That takes an investment. It takes work. Again, we're not going to get into nature nurture, right? This is an argument. Most people have their own version. But what this says is, regardless of which one you believe in, it says something about what it means to change or to adopt the methodology of one or the other. If you are innately here, it's going to be hard to work here. But maybe you can, and vice versa.
But
Other thoughts, yeah.
But the problem is the inertia in each these states.
Right. It's going to take energy to move. It's going to take energy to move. The question is, if you can overcome this, do you now, as a person, change and become more on this side? Or as soon as the energy is gone, do you go back?
And the third part, the slope is high.
Yeah. So what you're getting at is an important thing, right? This curve maybe doesn't look like this, right? And again, I don't know what it looks like, but here's a hypothesis. Maybe it looks more like this, right? Where, and this is the reason why I don't like the psychologist causing this innovator. Because what I would argue is that those are the innovators. And the fundamental question is, can you get there? Is there a way to get there? So what do you think? Well, we know innovators exist, right? So there must be some way to do it.
But the other point of view is the equilibrium is the maximum energy, and this is an ability to maintain this.
But since you have that hole on the top, it's still a relaxed position. It's maximum relaxed energy, something like that.
That's exactly right. So this is, again, as a physicist, is the question. Here, it takes energy to be an innovator. To exist anywhere other than here takes some energy. In this one, if this exists, you might start here or here naturally, but with enough work, you can get up and you can fall in there, and now it takes no energy to be an innovator. So which one do you believe?
But these are two models.
It's what?
Two models.
It's two. These are hypothesized models.
But this
right?
can be two opportunities. The move from one state to other state, passing in the middle, in a crystal state. But in the middle is a gas state to get the new state.
Okay. We're going to leave this behind. And here's why. You get it. It's a framework, right? It's not right or wrong. It's a way of thinking about things when you read a book, when you go be an innovator, when you go do whatever it is that you're doing, wherever you're creating value. It's a vocabulary that you can think about. And I have no data other than what the physics tells me, which probably might not even be right anyway, right? There are people who actually challenge this now. They say, there's an important word here, and we'll come back to this. Closed system. None of the systems we've talked about are closed. People aren't closed, businesses aren't closed, cities aren't closed. So again, you get it. You're thinking about it now in terms of the gas in the crystal. So we're going to leave it behind. We might come back to it at some point.
What about the
Yeah.
liquids?
Huh? Do we what?
Water, liquid, liquid?
So, actually, it's very interesting that you bring that up. There's a book by Stephen Johnson. You may have seen it. It's called Where Good Ideas Come From. And in it, what he talks about is that we can't have, he talks about it in terms of networking and how ideas mix. And he doesn't use these terms, but what he says is if you have a very regular network, for example, the normal business hierarchy, right, is a very regular network. You have a person at the top, a few people under them, and there's more people under them. That's a pretty regular crystal-like structure. You could also have it be completely disorderly, where no one reports to anyone, right? It's just all over the place. And what he says is the most innovative companies are fluid networks. They're fluid networks. So yeah, and that's actually the term that he uses, fluid networks.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it reminds me of Zen disciplines, because there you're supposed to be like water, which is extremely powerful, but moves effortlessly on its way.
Okay, so since you brought that up, you can already tell that I'm, probably you can tell, even though I'm dressed like this. I'm naturally a little more over here. Even though I was an engineer and a physicist, which sort of forced me to think a little bit over here, innately I'm a little more over here. So you heard that I had done some dance and that I do engineering. And one of the things I've started to do is to put them together. So we're going to do a demonstration that has to do with not quite Zen, but Aikido. It's a martial art. So is everybody ready? Yeah. Okay, so stand up, find someone who's about the same height and size as you. I know that's going to be tricky. It's okay, just mix a little bit, find someone who's about, yeah. This doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, good. Yeah, and if you want, you can come down here to have a little bit more room, because you're going to need some room for all of this. Okay, so I need someone to demonstrate with who's about the same height as me. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So here is an Aikido technique. And don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. Okay. No. Okay, so we're going to stand facing each other. I'm going to put my hand here. Yeah. And you put one hand here and the other hand on top. Okay. And now you try to bend my arm. Yeah, you're trying. Good. Try again. Okay, so that's not fair, right? It's my one arm against his two arms, right? It's crazy, right? Try it. So, like this. No. Like, yeah. Yep. Okay, now, here's the trick. Not stiff. Just relaxed and bent. See it?
Try harder.
Yeah. See? Thank you. It's not about strength. Try it. Try it with the partner. Go ahead. You just laugh at it, right? And then after you've tried, switch. Careful. Be nice to each other. Don't try to hurt each other. Oh no, did you hurt her? Oh boy. Yeah, be careful. Okay. So So here's the question with this. There are lots of ways, I'm in biomedical engineering. There are lots of ways that we can start talking about forces and all these things. So I could use this in class if I wanted to start now putting up equations and putting up the anatomy of the arm and all of that. But here's what I do instead. I could give someone a Harvard Business School case that talks all about the importance of being aligned as a company, right? That you're aligned around a common mission and you have all of the parts in place that need to be put in place. And that might take the students, how long? Maybe half an hour, something like that, to read through the case, and then we could discuss it. Or we could do this exercise. And I could say, if you're not aligned the right way, if your arm is funny or something like that, you can't support all of that weight. And if you're constantly fighting with your muscles, you can't resist that weight. It ends up being bad. But if you're aligned, biologically aligned in this case, you can support a lot more weight than you think. And your company can do the same. If your company is aligned, you can do a lot more than you think you can. And you can hopefully do a lot more than other companies who aren't aligned. So, one of the innovations that I've been playing with and working on is how to bring together movement. So, Aikido, Capoeira, contact improvisation, modern dance, how to take, even some theater, how to take some of those principles and translate them to teach business concepts and engineering concepts. So again, that's an example of me innovating, right? And pulling things from different places and putting them together. So do you want to do another one? Okay, good. So here's what we're going to do. And this is now going to be very interesting because normally I do this in a big open room. But you'll get the idea. We're going to start walking around the room, okay? So let's just start walking around anywhere you want. Now, as you walk, you're going to follow someone out of the corner of your eye, where they are. You're not going to follow them. You're just going to pick a person and know where they are all the time, okay? Sneaky, right? You're not trying to, this is a sneaky exercise. Just know, keep track of where they are. Okay, now here's the very hard part. You're going to keep track of that person. Keep walking, keep walking, keep walking. But you're now also going to keep track of a second person. Okay? Okay. So keep going, keep going. Keep walking, practicing, keeping track of people out of the corner of your eye. So now, I know, it's very hard, right? So now, when I clap my hands, what you're going to do is try to make an equilateral triangle. So, you're 1 point, they're the other 2 points. So you're going to have to move, okay? So does everyone understand? Are you ready? Go! Okay, so let's just stop, and I want to talk about this a little bit, because there are lots of things that I can do with this. So first, what I will do is tell you how I use this in an engineering class. I teach how to program computers, right, to my students, and they learn a little bit about computing and how to do the basic things on a computer. And then we do this exercise. And we do it actually outside, you know, it's on the grass and everything, and they do this. And then here's the challenge that I give the whole class. Say, for the next 2 weeks, as a class, so together, as a whole group, we're going to try to program the dynamics of this on a computer. Right? So how would we do that? And again, they've learned all of the skills to do this beforehand, but they've never dealt with a problem that's this hard to program up. So I started asking them questions about, well, what are the first things that need to happen in the program? And they give me answers like, well, we have, 22 people here, so we need to keep track of 22 positions. Okay, well, that should go at the very beginning. The next thing we need to do is have the ability to have those positions move, right? So again, when we continue adding more and more and more complexity, but people make suggestions about how to program this up, and we try them. A lot of times they don't work, right? But we learn by mistakes, right? So they try something and it doesn't work, and sometimes we go back out, there'll be a question about something. So for example, in the program, it would be very easy to say, you know what happens if everybody instantaneously went to the spot, to the correct spot? Right? And so they try it, and it doesn't work. Right? Well, what if everyone moved at the same speed? Right? And they try that, and that doesn't work either. And then they make a guess about what if you every time go about half of the distance to where you want to be. Right? So they start making hypotheses about what happens. And sometimes we go back out and we play it again because there are questions about, well, how does the game really work? Right? We spend like 2 weeks doing this. And the point is, this simple game, which doesn't take long to do, is now a class project that they all think is kind of neat. They actually go off and they show their friends this game, and they've even gone to some of the computer scientists, and they start asking them, how would you do this and how would you do that? And here's the cool part. I did this with a group of faculty, and some of them were in the math department. And guess what happened? Afterward, there was a 4-hour discussion, right? And the discussion was about, will you ever reach a point where you stop? And then the question was, can you guarantee that if you run it long enough that it'll stop, right? They started asking professor kind of questions. So again, this could work at a low level, it could work at the high level, and there's actually a professor who went through and made all sorts of proofs and was doing this as actually a project. So again, it was, I didn't intend that at all, right? But it just happened. Now, you can also change this and make it more about business. And there are a couple things you can extract. When you were walking around and you needed to keep track of one thing out of the corner of your eye, it's not too bad. Right? What about when you had to keep track of 2? Got a little harder. What if you had to keep track of 3? It would be really hard, right? Or 5, or 10, or 15. Well, guess what? People who are leaders need to do that all the time, right? This is actually a model of what it is for a leader to have to be able to keep track of what is happening. Now, you can think about theories of leadership, right? Is it important that you know where every single person is all the time? Or do you just need to know that that person is more or less on that side of the room? Right? So again, it's a different way of thinking about leadership. Yeah?
Or actually there was an interesting process for me because I picked someone, and when you say the second person, I basically told myself I need to find someone that looks or that has similar characteristics as the other person. So maybe that's what can happen with when you're a leader, you know?
That is great.
The first person that you hire sets the mood for the others.
Yep. Yeah.
And this is wrong.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's wrong, but it feels easier, right? It feels like an easier thing. So yeah, This is the entire innovation, educationally for me, is that all of a sudden it starts a discussion about leadership styles, about other things. Now, there's still another way that you can think about this. There are probably lots of them. There's another thing that you can map this to. What if I'm a business, right? Each one of you are now businesses. And all of the others are businesses too. And the two people that you're following might be your suppliers. Or maybe they're your customers, right? Maybe one is a customer, one is a supplier. You're constantly moving and shifting, right? To adjust the dynamics. But they're doing the same thing. Right? So again, this is a very different model than this. The market, the economy, and again, not all economists would agree with this, right? It's not quite like a crystal, and it's not quite like a gas. It's somewhere in between. So there's yet another way that you can think about this analogy in terms of what it means for business. Now, things don't evolve as quickly, right, in the business world as we did here, but that's what makes it a good activity, is you don't have to read the hour-long business case. You don't have to read a giant history book or a giant economy, book on the economy to get the fundamental concept.
But also to follow your analogy, if you focus on the supplier and the customer, then you actually lose track of your competition.
You do.
But then, it's like, at least they're telling us in the masters that, you do have to focus pretty much completely on your customer. But if you do so too much of it, then you lose.
You could become blind.
You lose your perspective of the market itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And any shift and change might come from the competition instead of the customer.
It's true. The competition, it could come from one of your friends, right, who goes out of business. If one of your partners goes out of business, that may in some cases have just as significant or more significant impact on you than if you lose a customer or two. Those are the people you're depending on. So yeah, again, like this where it's like, okay, you get it, you get it, right? So, we'll move on. So I want to pick up on and amplify that idea a little bit of it's important to be able to focus down and focus on one thing some of the time, right? You need to go deep sometimes, but sometimes you also want to go very broad too, right? You want to be able to have that perspective where you focus very intently on your customers, but you also want to be able to zoom back out and see the market, see the politics that are going on, see trends that are local, trends that are global, right? To be able to do that. Those are tricky, right? Because those are two very different, sometimes, ways of thinking. To see very small things and notice details versus being able to see the big picture. And again, there are psychologists that talk about some people naturally think about small things, some people naturally think about the big global things. So in education, one of the things we talk about is educating people to be T-shaped. So has anybody heard this term before? T-shaped?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. People who have the capability of being both deep and broad. So sometimes you're deep, sometimes you're broad. Here was a problem that I faced. And again, it's an example of trying to be innovative and be an entrepreneur in education. I teach in engineering. Engineering is thought to be a field that, you take, 20 or 30 courses, right? And most of them are mathematical. And you go very deep into one area, and then you go off and you work, and the idea is that you're supposed to stay deep, right? Well, and that's why engineers usually have the bad Stereotype of being the nerds with the protectors and the glass, right? You know the stereotypes, right? And it's because they're trained and forced to be very focused, very narrow. There are other fields not so much, but here's what happened in engineering. There were people who said the most valuable engineers will be the ones that are T-shaped, right? They have that depth, but they can also have be broad. So what do? They said, well, every program is going to be required, and this was in the US, to be accredited. You had to have at least 4 courses that were not technical, that were going to make you broad. Well, here's the problem. What does that make?